This content is brought to you by Uphold, which makes crypto investing easy. I've been a user of Uphold since 2017. They're one of my go-to exchanges. You can buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrencies on Uphold. You can also trade precious metals and equities. They have 10 plus million users, 250 plus cryptocurrencies, and they're available in 150 countries. As with all exchanges, you can buy and sell on them, but I highly recommend you custody your own crypto, not your keys, not your coins. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Ron Hammond of the Blockchain Association. Ron's no stranger to the show, and we're going to talk all things crypto and what's happening with regulations, enforcements, and in DC. Ron, great to have you back on.
Thanks for having me. It's always going to be on the show, so I really appreciate it.
Well, Ron, you're one of the first few people I thought of I need to speak to because, you know, your ears to the ground in DC. We've had a lot of actions against crypto companies, the SEC, New York regulators, and many more. Maybe if you can give us the macro picture of what's happening here.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot going on, like you said. We both have bags beneath our eyes. It's been probably a really tough time for all folks in crypto from all over the sector. So, but at least in the policy side of things, we're seeing what happens with FTX and the post-FTX collapse, as well as seeing the lack of congressional action from both the House and the Senate. If you recall, back in 2021, we had the Presidential Working Group on regulating stablecoins. And that report said if Congress does not pass legislation to regulate stablecoins, the Fed and other regulators are going to step in and do it. And that's what we're seeing right now, especially on the stablecoin front. There's a lot of other things happening on the SEC side, but we're starting to see the regulators understand that it's a split Congress right now. You got the Democrats controlling the Senate, and then the Republicans controlling the House. Right. And candidly, they don't see much legislation passing. So it's indicative of them to move forward in their minds. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of that. For the SEC, that looks like enforcement actions. From the Fed and others, it's policy statements that have some pretty really substantive, unfortunately, effects on the industry. And it's not good for the most part. So there's a lot going on. There's still a lot to uncover. And a lot of folks in Congress, especially, are wondering what's next or what else is coming, because they are equally as concerned with a lot of the statements recently.
Yeah, because, from the macro perspective, I see other countries moving ahead. The EU having the regulatory sandbox and Hong Kong, things happening there. And here we're getting enforcement actions against crypto companies, some who are regulated, like Paxos. I remember interviewing Charles Cascarilla, and they're regulated, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, you got to shut down BUSD. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here?
Exactly. And I think the greatest example of that is actually the Kraken shutting down their staking as a service platform. Even though it's offered internationally, it's now not available in the United States. And it's just indicative of what we're seeing now. We're seeing that the other jurisdictions are taking more of a lead here, or being a lot more friendly with the industry. Whereas the U.S. is telling folks, come chat with us. We'll find a way for compliance for you. And that ends up with them having to sever a complete, major line of business, especially for Paxos, major line of business right there. And so they have huge consequences. And I think a lot of folks, this has been pretty well known, at least in DC, when they say come in and talk, and we have other folks like Commissioner Peirce from the SEC saying, don't do it. She's one of the Republicans there. She's publicly saying, if you get asked, don't do it. And we're seeing what happens when you do get asked, and you do come in and you go in good faith. Like, again, Kraken and Paxos, to my knowledge, came in good faith to the SEC. And this is what happens. And again, this is all the more indicative on Congress needs to move forward here, because we're going to be getting the same sort of reaction from the regulators for the next 2 years, because they're going to be staying put in the Biden administration until 2024. And potentially they could be there for another 4 more years. And so this is really important for Congress to get moving. And it's on them. And I know it's tough with the split Congress, but it's now imperative.
So, and this is a hard question. So how do we fix this? How do we get Congress and light a fire on it? Oh, sorry, Ron. Okay, laptop decides to fall off.
As we got post editing there, right?
Yeah. Okay. So how do we fix this, Ron? How do we increase the sense of urgency for Congress? Is it
the industry has to come together along with folks like yourself and the Blockchain Association. And I'm asking that genuinely. I don't see a way out. Is it just like more pain ahead, or is there a solution that we can employ?
There's definitely a solution. Right now, at least behind the scenes in DC, it's not just the Blockchain Association, even though we're a trade association. So we're comprised of, about 100 companies, and we all work together and coordinate on strategy and communication, legislation and ideas and more. But there's other trade association groups. There's other groups as well, like individual companies who have folks in DC on policy or the lobbying side. But we are all in this together. We are all in the trenches right now, regardless of, if you're with this group or this group. Crypto is in the targeting line of fire right now from multiple sides. We are calling it the crypto carpet bombing. That's how bad it is. It's coming from every single direction from all of the different folks, and it's relentless. I mean, especially these past 2 months have been really brutal. And again, there's some folks saying that there's some coordination among the regulators. At least from what I'm seeing, I don't think it's that as much. There might be some with the recent SEC rule on Wednesday and the Fed statement that came out February 7th. And I'm happy to get into that a little later. But for right now, it seems like there's just a major push from the regulators to get moving, because there's some perception that they were caught with, off guard with the FTX situation, which has some merits in some case. But at the same time, they're being a lot more hostile, to your point, that the international regulators have really stepped up ahead. You mentioned the EU. The EU passed the MiCA recently, and that's got a lot of good things. It's got some things we didn't like, but at least there's a path forward. And a lot of companies saying at least we know what we can and can't do. Whereas the United States, it's you want to offer staking right now, you can. Do you want the SEC potentially knocking your door? There's a lot of concerns there, and that's just the problem. The chilling effect is really massive, and the worst is actually the federal banking regulators, and that's what we're really concerned about recently.
Right, because it seems like they are out to shut down stablecoins, and really, I don't know if they're going after USDC and Circle, which is I know Circle is regulated in the US. But then you have Tether and other stablecoins outside of the US. So how are they planning to do this? If they kill the stablecoins that are regulated in the US, that just gives the outside international players more strength. I just don't get it.
Exactly. And there's already concerns in DC, and in many cases well warranted, against like Binance, for example. But when we have seen the shutdown of certain services or certain exchanges, now exchanges aren't shutting down, but there's certain services they're not providing. We're seeing a lot of folks just go to Binance or other foreign exchanges, and the U.S. laws do not protect them. And at the same time, also they're getting a massive market share, and they have some shady business practices sometimes. And again, I look at Binance in particular because that's the name that comes up all the time in DC. But Tether, to your point, is the same thing as well. And so U.S. regulators have done a good job of having folks go to the fringes here. But to your earlier point, though, about what folks can do individually. So again, like I said, the Blockchain Association is companies. That's who funds us. But there's groups like Coin Center, the DeFi Education Fund. Those take individual donations. I also heard recently, actually, from a member of Congress explicitly say, I got a letter actually from a constituent. And that's something I really, you don't see too often. I wrote and responded to a lot of letters when I worked on Capitol Hill for several members of Congress. And they're mostly focusing on healthcare, abortion, the economy, the border. There's things that they're appeal to the masses. But when people are writing their individual member of Congress on crypto regulation, it's pretty astounding to hear that in a meeting saying, oh, I didn't think that was going to happen. And so, it might not be the high profile issue compared to like prescription drugs, for example. But now folks are reaching out to members of Congress and they're getting engaged. I've had actually outreach from members of Congress who may not sit on the relevant committees, but they're saying, hey, I got this letter from several of my constituents and I need to engage. And that's been exciting to see. So we're seeing the grassroots movement here. And I encourage folks, please reach out to your elected representative, because the regulators are a lot harder to control and they're a lot harder to map out. But Congress listens to the voters, and that's really important.
So Ron, another hard question for you, because folks are primarily not happy with the SEC and Gary Gensler, and it seems they're doing a lot of overreach here with the securities laws, because they're trying to say stable coins are securities, and of course crypto staking. And I know it's nuanced, right? I understand there's layers to it, but it just seems like they want to land grab as much as possible and put everything under the securities umbrella. And people are wondering, well, how is this guy going unchecked? And I know he's appointed by the president and he has to be impeached or whatever it is. But I guess it goes back to what you were saying earlier. Congress has to act to put guardrails around Gary Gensler and the SEC.
But to your point, though, I will say we've seen actually some pretty good comments from the Democrats against Chair Gensler, and that is really important. The Republicans are likely most of the time going to be in lockstep, saying they don't like the Democrat administration, regardless of what position it is. You know, there's some folks who are able to bring folks together across the aisle, but generally it's a lot easier just to be antagonistic to the other opposing party. But the Democrats are attacking their own, and the most recent one was Senator Gillibrand from New York, who had some pretty aggressive comments to Chair Gensler's approach to crypto regulation. It was on Tuesday, I believe, and Punchbowl News covered it as well. But when someone from your own party, and let alone a senator, comes out against you and your efforts, that's a warning shot, especially when the margins for the Senate are so thin. Let's just say if Chair Gensler wants to go for another position, or let's say he wants to get some folks confirmed in the Senate. He has now not only one, but two technically Democrat senators who have publicly lambasted him. I doubt he'll get Senator Lummis from Wyoming to support his efforts again, too. She's been pretty critical as well of his efforts at crypto. And so now, if he wants to do anything, he has 52 or 53 votes against him in a 100-vote Senate, and he's going to fail that. So I think the Biden administration may eventually wake up when their own senators are attacking the SEC. That's a wake-up call. And again, this is just for crypto. You mentioned he has a land grab. There are plenty of other issues, like on equities and ESG and others that are making a lot of folks in the other industries and financial services also really angry. So he is going an all-out approach. We knew he was going to do this, but he can only push so far until the ramifications come up politically. And we're starting to see that momentum build pretty heavily.
And are you hearing of further actions from the SEC as well as other agencies in government against the crypto industry? It seems like they're just ramping up with, the things that happened last week and so forth.
Yeah, and at least in the DC circles, we might hear a leak here or two, but generally, at least when it comes to enforcement actions, they do a pretty good job of making sure those leaks do not come out of the SEC. And that makes sense. Obviously, there's a lot of things on the line when there's an SEC enforcement action that they want to make sure they keep quiet ahead of time. But it seems like if you do the math here, he hired a lot more folks on the enforcement side to go after crypto a couple months ago. He's been in office almost for 2 years now. And so we're starting to see him kind of getting the wheels together to get moving. We're coming out of COVID as well. He's having the staff come back in a lot more frequently. And so I think that's a sign that we're seeing the Gensler side of the SEC come forward. And I think we're going to be seeing this kind of actions for the next 2 years, unfortunately. Just because that's what he's prioritized. But it's not just the SEC, too. We've also been hearing from other agencies as well, like the FDIC, the OCC, the Fed. They've been also very, very aggressive, and they're doing things such as potentially leaving the pathway to have crypto companies debanked. And again, I have not heard personally of this happening, but if there was a Fed statement actually on February 7th. It was a culmination of actually 3 other statements that came up, or 2 other statements before that. And it was discouraging banks from being part of the crypto activities, whether it be, banking certain companies who need to make payroll and stuff, or get involved on their own end on stablecoins or other products and services in the crypto space. And it was a warning shot saying, be careful. There's a lot of risk associated with crypto companies and crypto in generally, discouraging banks from doing that. Now, again, if they debank someone, that's a whole different issue. But right now, they are not giving banks a reason to get really into the crypto space. In fact, they're giving a way to get out of it. And I think that us on the industry side in DC, we're most concerned about that right now. So it's actually not the SEC is the biggest issue. It's actually the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC at the current moment. But there's still a lot of stuff the SEC that's been pretty atrocious as well right now.
Yeah, I mean, a debanking of these companies will be detrimental, just from operating costs, lines of credit, and so forth. And that would absolutely put some of them out of business and possibly send them overseas. That would be pretty bad. Wow.
Yeah, and we already hear from our members in the Blockchain Association enough about how it's difficult already to get a bank account. And again, this is just for them to pay their payroll, to make expenses and stuff. Like, this is not like them doing crypto activities. This is just them doing business operations and need to pay people in dollars. And if they don't have that banking access, they're going to be going elsewhere. And that's the concern. Again, I want to reiterate, I have not heard of folks being debanked right now, but they are definitely discouraging banks from getting more involved in the crypto space, which is concerning.
Let's talk about Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, because I saw a ranking member, Maxine Waters, she sent a letter or a tweet or whatever it may be to Patrick McHenry to get a hearing going around FTX and to bring Sam Bankman-Fried in.
Yeah, so SBF actually is being arranged in a court right now to go over his bail proceedings because he was caught on using a VPN to allegedly look at this or watch the Super Bowl. It was actually a pretty good game until the end, but I'm not sure if it was worth it on his end. But Maxine Waters, who's now, again, she's not in power right now. It's the Republicans in the House. She told Patrick McHenry, who is the lead Republican, I want to have SBF testifying in front of our committee. And again, it almost happened back in December, if you recall. But hours before he was supposed to testify in D.C., or virtually in some cases, he was arrested. And so there was a subsequent letter as well where the Republicans, Huizenga from Michigan, he sent a letter to the DOJ, I believe, and the SEC saying, I think this timing is a little suspicious because a lot of folks in D.C. as well were caught off guard, including myself. And we want to make sure before you guys made this arrest warrant here, why the timing? We were having him in front of Congress. We were going to get a lot more answers that we still don't have, candidly, right now in the bankruptcy proceeding. Now, mind you, it's him testifying, so there could be a lot of falsehoods and lies too. Yeah. But they're wondering, look, is there any coordination here? I don't think there was, but it's always good to have that. But Maxine Waters wants to build off the bipartisan effort that she led when she was in charge with McHenry and having SBF there personally. I don't think it's going to happen just because of everything going on in the bankruptcy and criminal proceedings, but we'll see.
Yeah, the timing of that was very interesting. It sets off some red flags, but I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist or anything like that. But the timing was interesting. So hopefully they can get him in. But like you said, it may not happen with everything that's going on. So Ron, we're starting off 2023 in a rough area, right? It's going to be a grind this year. But can exchanges and U.S. companies come together to sue some of these government agencies like the SEC for not having clarity? Like, I feel if they come together and say, hey, look, we're getting ad hoc requests or rulings that this is the security, but we don't actually have the guidelines and we don't know what, we're getting these penalties and enforcements and so forth. Can they do that?
They can. And I think the issue is that legislation, while it is slow, and I know folks are saying like Congress moves slow, but that's by design. Congress does move slow, and in a split Congress, not much gets done because you have a lot of the Democrats and a lot of the Republicans just have no way to disagree, or even if they do disagree, it only takes a few in the Senate to really absolutely kill even any good form of bipartisan support. So this then puts the pressure on the courts. And take the Ripple case, for example. It's taken years. And it's pretty well known, at least within DC, that regardless of what the answer is or regardless of what the judge comes up with, there's going to probably be another subsequent trial after that. And so that could delay it for even more. And so if these companies do bring suits or these organizations, and again, it's definitely something on the table for a lot of groups, given the recent actions, because they definitely probably have overstepped in several spots. Just keep in mind that this is going to probably be a couple of years, and the United States is going to see their position even more as a leader in financial services. I wouldn't call them a leader in crypto at this moment, unfortunately, but we're going to see that farther and farther away because folks are going to be waiting in DC for those important court cases to be decided. And so my urge is that, again, I think Congress is the play. Congress is the move that we can get a lot of stuff through. They're the ones who can supersede the regulators, but we got to get some pressure on them. I think stablecoins is a pretty good start. And if the Paxos situation wasn't going to encourage that, I don't see what else will, because a lot of folks are wondering what to do now. And so I think it's really important that we look to not just only at the courts. I think we got to make sure Congress is the play, because in some cases, Congress is going to move faster than the courts. And that's a lot better for us. And we are seeing some good momentum in Congress. It just takes a long time, unfortunately.
Final question here for you. Are there any upcoming hearings related to crypto regulations that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so we had in Valentine's Day the Senate banking hearing on crypto. It was with a couple academics. It was pretty well attended, actually, and we had a lot of good back and forth. And I think we saw Senator Warren, Senator Brown. They take a lot of the media attention for them being critical. But we saw a couple of Democrats ask some pretty good pointed questions. I wouldn't call them crypto supporters, but I call them asking good questions to learn more themselves personally. And so that's a good sign. And I think we'll take that momentum going forward. The House looks like they're going to have a hearing on March 9th. And that's going to be on crypto generally. Politico reported a couple of weeks ago, but it's still unclear exactly what direction. And then I'll say this, with the Republicans in charge of the House, I think Gary Gensler is going to be coming up the next, I'd probably say 2 months or so. I wouldn't be shocked that he makes his appearance. The Senate, it seems like it'll be a little longer than that, but the House wants to have his feet to the fire, and that's going to be really important. Again, we don't have time yet when it's going to happen, but I'd say probably next 2 months or so, you'll see Chair Gensler testifying and asking some really tough questions and being held accountable for what's happening in his agency, and we'll see what happens.
Ron, always great information, and thank you and the Blockchain Association for fighting on behalf of the industry. Always great. Thank you, man.
Hey, all thanks to you, man. I really appreciate all your help.